Parmarthāya Pratibodhitāṃ Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Grathitāṃ Purānamunina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitāmritavarshiniṃ Bhagavatīṃ Ashtādasādhyāyinīṃ Ambatvāmanusandadāmi Bhagavad-gīte bhavadveshini. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. The topic of this webinar has aroused a lot of interest, and in fact, in this session I find more attendance than is usual. As one of you pointed out a few minutes ago, this topic of death and dying has become all the more relevant and important in these days of the pandemic. Really speaking, death has been a matter of great interest to all thinkers from time immemorial. People have reflected on death in very many different ways. Bhagavad-gīta touches upon death and dying in its own beautiful way, being a representative of the Vedas. The Geetā distills the wisdom of the Vedas into shlokas that are far easier to understand. All the chapters of the Geetā do have something to say about dying, for the simple reason that as a spiritual science, Bhagavad-gīta has got to touch upon death. If it were not to touch upon death, its scope would have been rather limited. While you and I are so preoccupied with the scenes and scenarios, situations and settings of this life of ours, Bhagavad-gīta sees things from a point of view way higher than ours. Someone like Shri Krishna sees everybody against the backdrop of many lives before and many lives to come in future too. Right in the second chapter, when he begins his instruction to Arjuna, he roars, Arjuna, please understand, we have come number of times before. We will come a number of times in future too. It was never a time, there was never a time when you, me, or these kings were absent. There will never be a time when these kings, you or me, will be absent. We were around, we are here, and we will be around. This is a way of talking about death, as they put it picturesquely. Death is not a full stop. Death is not the end of everything. It is only a comma. Death is not a period. It is only a half period. He is brought out by the vision of Bhagavad-gīta. In every chapter, think about 15th chapter, Lord Krishna talks about how the Jīvātmā carries with it not only the mind, but even the subtle indriyas. Indriyani manaschayam adhishtaya upasevate. It goes from one life to another. And Sri Krishna offers an illustration. just as a breeze carries the fragrance of flowers to another place. The Jivatma carries its sanskaras, the impressions gathered in this life, the vasanas accumulated, are carried forward. I can probably pick up some shlokas from other chapters too, but then I will not be able to do justice to the topic using the verses of chapter 8, where prayana kala, the time of dying, is given more importance, stressed more than anywhere else. What makes the 8th chapter go into this topic of dying is, towards the end of the 7th chapter, Sri Krishna praises yogis, saying, there are great yogis who connect with me even at the time of dying. Arjuna is excited. How is that possible? When we die, how can we unite our mind with you, the Supreme Being? Sri Krishna answers that question. And the chapter 8 is very much devoted to the topic of death. Therefore, when someone dies, while it is a practice to read chapters of Bhagavad Gita in the couple of days following the death, to begin with, even when the dead body is lying, getting ready to go to the cremation ground or the burial ground, Geetā is chanted. Chapter 8 is specially chanted, for it talks about the art of dying. Quickly, I should mention, in Buddhism, in Jainism, and in other religions too, death has been a topic of special attention. In Bhagavad Gita, we are urged to remember the impermanence of life. Swami Chidānandaji used to say, everybody dies. Everybody dies, but nobody dies. The physical body has to go. Anybody reads Vedanta hastily, it may seem to be self-contradictory. At some place it is said everyone has to die. At another place it is said everybody is immortal. So we may wonder, what is the truth? That's where Swamiji had clarified. If you are obsessed with your body, physical body, you are bound to die. If you raise your consciousness to a higher level than that of the physical body, you will realize that you are imperishable. Therefore, you die if you equate yourself to the body, and if you equate yourself with the pure self, you conquer death. In the 8th chapter, Lord Krishna does action, but looks at the topic as a matter that to spiritual exercise during dying. The most quoted shloka prayasabhavam yati na astyatra samshaya. Taken literally, this shloka means anybody who thinks of God at that moment, which is the last moment of one's life, reaches the feet of God, proximity of God. Or Advaita Vedanta would say, will merge in God, discover her or his oneness with God. The word is antakale. And some of us clever ones would say, ah, that is good, I know. I will ensure that at the time of dying, the last 2 or 3 minutes, I will spare for God. Before that, I will do whatever else I want to do. Eat, drink, and make merry. But just before dying, I will think of God. That is not cleverness, that is the height of foolishness, which is made clear by Sri Krishna himself in the very next verse, 6, or to be precise, 7. He just now had said in verse 5, Antakale mam smaran, about dying. And 7, he says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmara yudhyacha. Because where you go is determined by what you think of during the time of death. What it implies is you have to think of God sarveshu kaleshu, all the time. And that expression sarveshu kaleshu, all the time, further boils down to think of God here and now. I can hear some of you saying, oh my God, I have to think of God here now itself. You better do it. For we never know when, number one, our time of death arrives. Somebody who is unwell may live very long, and somebody among us who is apparently fit and fine may go much before others imagine or expect. Therefore, sarveshu kaneshu. It is said that when a certain earthquake hit Maharashtra, that was at a place called Koina, maybe in early 80s or maybe 70s. Swami Chidānandaji gave that example in one of his discourses in the late 80s. In Koina, in Maharashtra, many people died when a certain earthquake occurred. But it was reported later that some people who were thought to be religious, who were showing off their religiosity, actually, as the buildings were collapsing, they were very concerned with their wealth and securing some possessions and so on. And in contrast, there were others who were generally looked at as very materialistic, attached to money and pleasure, who, to the surprise of some people who were watching, started remembering God when they felt that they might die any moment. So this shows, or this throws some light on the private lives of people. Somebody may show herself or himself as being very God-minded, but privately they might be filled with worldly thoughts. And some who do not show themselves to be religious might actually be very much loving God. So this is a practical advice Sri Krishna gives us. Now I should not delay throwing a bit of light on what this remembering God is after all. From a broader angle of view, it's not necessary that you say Krishna, Krishna, Rama, Rama, Shiva, Shiva, or Hanuman or Devi. While that is a wonderful way, no doubt, basically, remembering God is to stay in a state of goodness. Goodness, a state of no hatred towards anybody. A state of not wanting to take revenge against anybody, not aiming at settling score with anybody. Especially as we put it, in your heart, you must be totally free of negative energy. If you think on the basis of certain values that there has been some injustice somewhere and I would like to see justice in that situation, seeking justice is a different matter. But to harbor certain negative emotions, certain sadistic tendencies, taking pleasure in suffering of somebody and such things is unspiritual. To fight for justice, to fight for equality, to fight for the implementation of proper values of life is part of our vyavahara prapancha, transactional life. So I would not try to elaborate this, but what I have said boils down to this mainly. To remember God is no different from to be in a state of great mental purity. And we should not postpone being pure-minded, being selfless, being loving and being lovable, being caring, being compassionate, etc. We should not postpone for another year, another decade, and so on. Only when here and now we start being alert, watchful, there is a certain momentum built. And whenever we are called by the law of nature to move on to next life, that movement being described as dying, we are well set. Sri Krishna also throws wonderful, precious light on what the nature of practice could be. It is in this chapter that he uses the beautiful word Abhyasa Yoga. In chapter 6 also, with respect to mind control, he had used the word Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihyate. In chapter 12 also, he uses the expression Abhyasa Yoga. But here, he not only uses the word, but throws some light on the details. Verse 8 of chapter 8 says, Abhyasa yogena yoga yuktena chetasa nanyagamina. This chetas, this mind of ours, no matter how qualified or educated or how good social status we have, basically tends to be very restless, going in 100 directions. We might be smart in some area of work and might have got much recognition in the society. That is all right, it's good in its own way. But with regard to the holistic fulfillment, holistic meaningfulness of life, we need to not just excel in some professional area or in some area of a talent, singing well or dancing well or speaking well or writing well or doing some extraordinary scientific research or in business and so on. They're okay, all of them have a place. But when it comes to holistic excellence, we need to rise above thought itself. Thought is an illusion. Thought is not real. Thought and the scenes and scenarios that thought creates are all of questionable reality. In fact, it would not be an exaggeration to say God is when thoughts go to backseat. As long as we are caught in thoughts, thoughts are like a cinema show. As long as we are absorbed in the cinema show, forgetting it is a cinema, thinking that the heroes and the villains, the jokers and others are all real, and we are fully immersed in it, well, what happens to our real life then? Apply that analogy here. Thoughts are the cinema show. And when Sri Krishna says, practice, practice, and paramam purusham divyam chintayan, anuchintayan. This divya purusha, call him Narayana or call her Jagannatha, call that as formless, nameless, doesn't matter. Divya purusha, a certain supremely divine truth, is the truth of your own existence when you see through the game that thoughts are playing. Therefore, friends, essential spirituality involves our training ourselves to step aside from thoughts. Higher meditation is not about substituting thoughts. In higher and more mature thoughts, we remain the witness of thoughts. We are the sakshi of our own thoughts. All that is implied here when he says, meditate on the Divya Purusha. And in another verse, he talks about how you and I may take the support of Om. He says, Om iti ekaksharam brahma vyaharan anusmaran yapraya, leaving the body behind. Those two words, deham tyajan, just those two words are enough for you and me to get the message. What? Leaving the body? That means I am not the body? Exactly, you are not the body. In fact, to be free of the body is in that sense a celebration. The body has all kinds of limitations, all kinds of shortcomings. The body is the breeding ground of hunger, thirst, endlessly, and many other urges, and then it is the breeding ground of diseases. In spite of all that, we are so attached to this body, this personality, this image we have in the society about ourselves, right? As we turn more and more spiritual, we do not become irresponsible. We take care of the body, but without attachment to it. We go around the society with this personality. If somebody asks us our age, our position, what we do in life, what field of work we were into, etc., we say, yeah, I was a school teacher, I was a scientist, I was a government official, whatever. Please do say that. But all that put together should sit lightly in your consciousness. It should not pull you down. You should not be obsessed with that self-description. All self-descriptions put together are to be only a drop in the bucket. Self-descriptions are nowhere compared with the true self. Therefore, Ramana Maharshi would talk about the I thought, which is a summation of self-descriptions, good and bad, high and low, our memories of success, our memories of failure, all of them together make the I thought, I-thought. And Maharshi Ramana would say, when this I thought subsides through inquiry, through Vedanta contemplation, the real I shines forth. Ahaminasha bhaji, ahamahantaya, spurati hridsvayam, paramapurna sat, says the 20th verse of Upadesha Sara. And Shri Krishna gives valuable insights into what that pure self could be. He says, it is all-knowing. The personality has limited knowledge. The pure self is all-knowing. Kavim Purana Manushasitaram Anoraniyansam Anusmaredyaha Sarvasya Dhataramachintya Rupam Aditya Varnam Tamasa Parastat. It's beyond all darkness, beyond sorrow, beyond fear, beyond agitation. There is a dimension to your existence, Sri Krishna says, and for God's sake, contemplate on it. At the time of dying, prayana kale, manasa achale, with a mind which is more cooperative. You and I would say, but our mind is not cooperative. Sri Krishna would ask us, what are you doing on a daily basis to make it cooperative? Do you do some abhyasa? Or do you live in a very mechanical way, just doing the same thing you did yesterday and not being watchful at all? Lord Krishna talks about certain practices which have, I must admit, a strong flavor of Yoga Shastra. At certain places in Bhagavad Gita, he speaks the language of Raja Yoga more than Jnana or Bhakti. But those expressions of Raja Yoga are complementary. They go hand in hand with the insights of Jnana Yoga. In Jnana Yoga, the way of wisdom, what is important is being stationed in right understanding. Right understanding, the Jnana Yoga asserts, is complete in itself. Nothing else is required. Liberation is through samyak darshana, right seeing, and it doesn't require any assistance from anywhere else. Is the stand of the Upanishads. But that doesn't mean that we prematurely let go of practices. I came across a passage of J. Krishnamurti and I was pleasantly surprised. Just this evening I read. He talks about the need to cultivate and then the need to stand back and stand silent. He explains how in the context of agriculture, you plow the earth, you make the soil soft, you throw away weeds that might have been there before, you throw away rocky, stony pieces. Now you have cultivated. That is called cultivation. You cultivate the land. Then you sow the seeds. He calls it one stage. And he says that is necessary. There is a phase where you prepare the ground. Then, for heaven's sake, you have to stand back and not do anything. You have cultivated the land, you have sown the seeds. Now, the heaven should operate on that soil. By heaven we mean nature. Don't interfere. Don't go on disturbing that soil. The seeds are inside. Let them grow, facilitated by laws of nature. What a beautiful analogy. The otherwise untraditional, not traditional, otherwise the iconoclastic speaker said. There is a time to cultivate, then there is a time to just stay quiet. That is, watch. If you do not cultivate certain refinement of your mind, your emotions, you do not help yourself to have greater concentration, greater calmness of mind, and so on. To say, I will just be Sakshi will be impossible in its implementation. And if you cultivate, and then it has become a habit with you, you go on mumbling and jumbling, you go on talking something, reciting something, you continue to engage in mental activity. That would be like after cultivating the ground, you are again running the tractor upon it or other agricultural equipment upon that soil, killing those seeds. So there is a time to work on the soil, then there is a time to stand back. The chapter 8 seems to go hand in hand with that kind of wisdom. On one hand, it is said, Abhyasa Yoga. And then it is said, just Geetā, just quiet contemplation. Talking of death, there is obviously in all of us a lot of fear of death. The fear of death is much because of not knowing what is going to happen. It is also because of a much deep-rooted attachment to what we possess, our family members, our house, our wealth, our status, 100 things. Eknath Ishwaran, who was a wonderful spiritual teacher based a little north of San Francisco, gave that example how his grandmother taught him about death. When he was a little boy, he had asked his grandmother, why do people fear dying? And the grandmother, whom he regarded as his guru, said to him, sit on this chair. A chair with arms was in that room. And no matter what I do, you must hold on to the chair. This is the instruction for you. And he said, okay. So the little, I guess, 10-year-old boy sat on a big, heavy, solid chair and clung to the arms of that chair. And then the grandmother took him by her hands and tried to pull him out of the chair. And as per the instruction given, he would not let go of the chair. And it was quite painful, her trying to pull him, he trying to hold on to the chair. It was painful. But after a couple of minutes, she says, now let us do a second part of this exercise. This time, don't hold on to the chair. He says, okay. So again, he sits on the chair, holding the arms. And when the grandmother grabs him and tries to pull him, he lets go of the chair. Doesn't cling to the chair. Easily he comes into the embrace of his loving grandmother. Through this story and through this actual exercise, I believe the grandmother of Ishwaran said to him, if you cling to memories, if you cling to notions of I, me, and my, and ideas of my wealth and my house, my spouse, my grandchildren, my, people like us, scholars also, the books I have written and the lectures I have given and the places I have gone and made friends with so many Vedanta students. Oh, how do I leave all of them? Grahasthas or sannyasis, old or young, all of us have ideas of we are equal to this. Who am I? I'm the owner of this house. Who am I? I'm the wife of that man. Who am I? I'm the father of these two boys. Who am I? We have 100 answers. They are that solid chair. All of them have a relative validity, we don't deny, but when the grandmother pulls the boy, he has to let go of the chair. If you and I prepare ourselves to let go of these ideas, Vedanta says they are only ideas. You have given the ideas such a sense of reality that they look like solid truth. Otherwise, it is an idea. Idea is just a thought. So if you and I, through contemplation on God, on truth, you and I have been students of the Vedanta. And many are the places where there is a line, there is a sentence, there is a passage, which makes us feel good. We feel so secure, we feel so calm. Mark those passages, visit those passages more and more, and stay in that state of contemplation in contrast to repetitive, recurring thoughts about I'm so and so, I'm such and such, I'm high, I am low, I am a success, I am a failure, and so on. All that is mental noise. So Sri Krishna talks about the great two-step spirituality. Hold and let go. Swami Chidānandaji used that expression. Attach and detach. He said that summarizes spirituality. That summarizes, dear friends, the art of mature dying. Attach and detach. I said hold and leave. Hold God. How do I hold God? By using a passage, using a mantra, using a certain intuitive insight you have about what God or the divine principle is. I've already said it doesn't have to be looked at as a person. It's a divine way of being. Hold on to that divine way of being. You definitely have experienced certain divinity during your studies, during some satsangs, sometimes in the company of some saintly person. You would have felt so peaceful. That is your nature. Hold on to it. And holding on to something higher, it will definitely be easier for you to let go of these 100 self-descriptions which make living also stressful and dying also very painful. Therefore, spiritual maturity can empower us, enable us to meet with death with a smile. Sri Krishna gives some yogic technical descriptions. Even I don't claim to have fully understood how to do it. Bhruor madhye pranam aveshya samyak. Fix your pranas in the middle of the eyebrows. That perhaps has some, explanations in the Yoga Shastra in a language that you and I can understand. Otherwise, how do we bring our pranas to the midpoint of the eyebrows? Would be a question. We can, of course, bring our mind to the midpoint of the eyebrows. Think of not the head or the feet, not something outside the house or in the next room. Those are, usual thoughts. Our thoughts go to objects around us. So rather than them, can we bring our thoughts to the midpoint of our own eyebrows? Bhruor madhye vicharan aveshya would have made sense to us. But Sri Krishna says, Bhruor madhye pranam aveshya. If we bring our thoughts to the middle of the two eyebrows, I guess that is pretty close to what he is talking. Pranam aveshya. Lastly, I would like to say that Lord Krishna, using a bit of a mystical language, makes a very interesting assertion. This verse 15 of chapter 8 has been of special interest to me in what we regard interfaith discussions. In Hinduism, the verse 15, on one hand, reaffirms rebirth, punarjanma, mamupetya punarjanma, dukkhalayam ashashvatam, na apnuvanti. If anybody who is dying reaches me, brings his mind to a loving contemplation of God, then that person, lady or man, will not be born again. Punarmanti Mahatma. And then, that was the introduction, but the very next verse makes a statement of great importance to interfaith studies. The verse 16 says, Arjuna, let me tell you, all the lokas, Brahma loka, then Swarga loka, then some, Antariksha loka, some 7 lokas are mentioned. Bhuha, Bhuha, Suha, Maha, Jana, Tapaha, Satyam. This is another expression. So Hinduism has always believed that the soul that you and I are, we are actually an ātmā in the body. having a body at present, and this physical body, whether we like it or not, we drop at some point and move on. This Jivatma that you and I actually are goes to different realms. Today, physics also talks about multiverse, not universe, but multiverse, multiple universes with their own space and time apparently. If the space and time of this universe and the space and time of another universe are different, then an amazing outcome would be they can even coexist, because this space doesn't clash with that space doesn't clash with this space. Each in, just as you and I are talking and somebody is dreaming of being in Timbuktu. His Timbuktu is African experience doesn't collide with our experience of the town where we are sitting, nor our experience collides with his experience. So, with some limitations of that analogy, multiple universes, multiverse is a fascinating topic which joins hands with some mystical insights of our rishis. But this 16th verse says, all the universes, all the lokas are marked by limitation temporally in terms of time. A soul that goes there after some length of time comes back to the earth. Whereas if someone reaches me, he says, we can imagine Sri Krishna saying that with his chest up. I guess Sri Krishna's chest was always up. He was all confident all the time. He never was depressed or sullen or losing hope, etc. Sri Krishna was master of masters. But here he says, if someone reaches me through intense contemplation, tasya punarjanmana vidyate. Coming back to this earth, again coming out of the womb of a mother, punarapi janani jatare shayanam, doesn't apply to him or her, he says. Now, why I say it is of some relevance to interfaith discussion is, you know what? Christianity, Islam, and some of these religions believe in only one life. And they say, unless you surrender to Christ or surrender to maybe Prophet Muhammad, some condition is put. Unless you fulfill that condition, you will go to hell, eternal hell. So this is the only life. If you have been good in the form of surrendering to certain altar, you go to hell. You go to heaven. If you don't surrender, you go to hell. And in Hinduism, there is this topic of Punarjanma. Interestingly, the common thread is born, one continues there is, whether it is eternal to this, being born, thirst, and many other problems of worldly life, that is also like hell. So whether it's eternal hell or this earthly life, they are not what is desired in the bottom of our heart. We want to be free. So, to make matters simple, I personally believe this rebirth is the truth, reincarnation is the truth. But Jesus Christ might have simplified matters in order to urge his followers, rise to that higher consciousness and get freed. He perhaps said, unless you do that, rising to that higher consciousness, no matter what else you have done, what else you have achieved, Unless you rise to that higher consciousness, you will go to hell. So heaven there could mean moksha. Hell could mean rebirth. If you look at it that way, though the expressions may not be accurate, but in spirit they would come together. Connected to this passage of the Jivatma after the so-called death, there are two other dimensions in this 8th chapter itself. One is how, depending upon the nobility, the amount of good sanskaras or absence of it, a Jivatma could go on a higher path and get liberated in another loka. That is called Shukla Marga. Then there is, this is just a naming, white and black. It has nothing to do with the color itself. But like we in mathematics say, let the two options be A and B. Let the two possibilities be X and Y, etc. Geetā uses the expression Shukla and Krishna. In a certain verse, Shri Krishna says, this entire creation is marked by two possibilities after one dies. The verse number 26 says, Shukla Krishna. Shukla Krishna is dual in number. Shuklacha, Krishnacha. So the path of Shukla, white, the path of Krishna, black, like A and B. Shukla Krishna gati hyete jagataha shashvate mate. All in Dvivachana, dual number. In Sanskrit, in addition to singular and plural, there is a dual number. That's grammar, let us put it behind. The higher path, which we have chosen to name as Shukla, and the lower path, which we have chosen to name symbolically as Krishna, have always been in this creation. Jagataha shashvate mate. Ekaya yati anavrittim. The higher path takes one to higher regions, and before long, that soul gets liberated. It reaches the higher consciousness. The higher consciousness is the consciousness free of egoism. The higher consciousness is marked by clear seeing that one is actually pure spirit, pure consciousness, pure Chaitanya, and nothing else. Whereas the lower consciousness is, well, as compared with how I used to be, I am much more sattvic now. I have become a much better person. Even my spouse agrees, and that there cannot be a better certificate than that, etc. You some kind of pat yourself on the back and you say, but still that idea, I am this personality, maybe an improved personality. That idea continues. That is lower path. That lower consciousness. So Shukla Krishna Gati. So one takes you way above, and just a matter of some more time, you get freed from time itself. The other brings you back on the earth. That is Avritti, return. And the other dimension is, which is not very important for us, but it's fascinating in its own way, relativity of time is talked about in chapter 8 by Shri Krishna. It would be an interesting exercise to compare these statements with what today's science talks about, relativity of time. But this is a Puranic language. This is a spiritual, religious language. It is said, Sahasra Yuga Paryantam Aharyad Brahmano Vidu. One day of Brahma, for him, what is just one day equals millions of years. I'll not go into the figures, which I don't remember also. Sahasra Yuga, one Yuga itself is many, many, many thousands of years. Then Sahasra Yuga. Then one night of Lord Brahma is similarly Yuga Sahasram. In other words, what is long period of time is at once, short period of time for someone else. So in those wonderful insights of Albert Einstein, there was a reference to someone traveling at speeds that are closer to that of light, time slows down. Someone who is on the earth, which is our reference, scheme of reference, frame of reference, time is much long. So there was the illustration which someone like Carl Sagan had made into beautiful, nice, illustrative science fiction movies too. Twins, Siamese twins as we call them. One of them goes on a special vehicle which is going at very high speed. It's not as fast as light, 80%, 70% of the speed of light. And he goes on a long voyage and comes back. So the other guy, the twin brother, is on the earth. By the time this boy, this brother on the earth is 32 years old, he finds an aircraft coming back, or spacecraft, I should say, comes back. Oh, that is his twin brother. But because that fellow was traveling all the time at a speed closer to that of light, he comes back and he is still, let's say when he left, he was 8 years old. He is now only 9 years old. For him, just 1 year passed, while for this guy on the earth, 24 years had passed. This is an unbelievable fallout of that. It's not some perceptual confusion. Rather, the idea of time being absolute is a perceptual error. We are caught in a certain perceptual balloon or bubble. And in this perceptual bubble, time seems to be unquestionably true. In reality, time is, in other words, let me conclude this reference. If somebody asks, but which time was real? Was the time of the brother who stayed back real? Or was the time of the brother who went on this spacecraft real? Like Yadnavar or who was that? Ashtavakra, someone answered questionable value. They are real in their own domains, but nothing is real irrespective of domains. Domain independent reality, neither the time axis of the brother who flew nor the time axis of the brother who stayed put would pass the test of being real. So 8th chapter talks about dying, going to other domains, and a whole lot of relative truths. But let me conclude my talk saying the thrust is not to go on examining all these possibilities in the relative realm, but strive towards rising in attention, alertness, and enhanced awareness, and rise above thought itself, rise to that pure consciousness, which is our own nature. Try to realize your true nature as pure consciousness, Chit, Sat Chit. That is the greatest medicine for this problem, this big riddle or puzzle called dying. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, there are one or two comments here on the Shobha and Ramesh Hariharan. Nice to see both of you here. Your thoughts on interfaith interpretation are refreshing and unifying. It is much needed in today's apparently divided world. Pranam, Swami. Happy to get your feedback. Yes, please do ask by turning your mic on or put it in the chat box by typing.
Guru Prasad ji wants to ask question.
Hi.
No, only thing, Swamiji, Janakiram here.
Yes, Jankiramji.
What I want to say is, see, when we take birth, that portion of till we get adjusted to growing,
Yes.
6, 7, 8 years, we don't remember anything.
Yes.
Okay. But at the time of death, the fear is of the unknown and
Yes.
non-familiarity.
Yes.
So leaving the familiar terrain and going to non-familiar terrain.
Yes.
So that is how that is addressed.
Yeah. That is addressed by such regular satsang that you and I can do. You know, somebody may be afraid to go to America, but if he meets a number of people who have gone and come, who are living there, and he has a certain knowledge from trustworthy sources, his fear becomes so much less, right? Here, we don't have people like that, but Shastras, the scriptures, and illumined saints, say to us, and though it is not as simple as reports on America or the Gulf countries, Singapore or Europe, this is more abstract. However, let me put it this way. When you carefully study the teachings of these masters, Ramakrishna, Ramana, and so on, you will at least appreciate how it can be so. You may not be able to say it has to be so, but yeah, that makes sense. It can be so. It's possible that such other worlds exist and liberation exists. So that possibility, suppose you and I realize, we begin to accept and appreciate, half the battle is won. Whereas those who do not do any satsanga, who focus only on roti, kapda and makan, and then get into all kinds of fights and, who waste away their energy in even the so-called social rights and, various rights movements, etc. With due respect to their passion for equality and rights of all human beings and so on, they have not, seen the whole of life. So satsanga is the answer. There have been many cases of devotees who come in touch with, come in contact with very, very noble, elevated masters. And then not just the masters, those devotees or disciples who spend some years in the company of those masters also are reported to have faced death with a smile. Yeah, there was one case, for example, the Prince of Aund in Pune. About him, it is reported, a couple of his close friends go to him when he was on deathbed, and they went to console him, but they come back consoled. He in fact said to them, "Hey, don't worry, I am not afraid, I am fine." And in the teachings of, I think he was in touch with Nisargadatta, J. Krishnamurti, etc., that guy, the prince who was dying. He actually brought solace to these visitors. Of course, I don't take it literally as 100%, but even to an extent, if a dying person is able to, enjoy those spiritual insights that she or he not only received, but enjoyed, saw the possibility of, yeah, it can be so, yeah. Sometimes the very possibility of something gives us tremendous relief, Whereas when our mind says that is all okay for talking, such a thing cannot exist. If we live in doubt, we would rather be quite afraid. So in one word, satsanga is the answer to this practical problem.
Thank you, Swamiji. And
Welcome.
one more point I have is, whatever Hinduism says for moksha or liberation, what needs to be done, all the other religions also tell the same thing in a different manner. I just wanted to clarify that. Since you quoted Christianity and Islam, I just wanted to say they are no different in the teachings as such.
Human values and so on. But then in every religion, there are some fanatics who distort and twist the teachings of their books to their own agenda, which is faulty. I agree with you. Otherwise, that's what Mahatma Gandhi was trying to say to all. Every religion has some good and some bad, he said. I would say the so-called bad is secondary and it is highlighted by vested interests. Otherwise, every religion presents something good only. Immaturity of the practitioners make some portions bad, so to say.
I have a comment, Swamiji. Thank you so much for the beautiful talk, and which actually enables us for any kind of challenge, whether you die or facing somebody else's death. Your talk reminded me of Sadhguru's wife. I don't remember her name, Vijji. That's how she took her life. She said one day that she was prepared to leave and she left gracefully, and they have a way of leaving, like controlling their breath. That's how she left this world. So when people have that kind of control, they leave gracefully. That is inevitable anyway. We don't have any option. We have to leave. Why can't we leave? Why can't we prepare ourselves to leave gracefully? And that's the wisdom. I think the wisdom lies in understanding the fact. Thank you very much. And it's wonderful. It's a beautiful message.
Thank you.
Swamiji.
Yes, Mr. Rao.
Yeah, I wish to ask you one small question. In the deep meditation, we leave the body and then our existence of the body is not known to you. Is it not a higher consciousness where your body is already left? It's an experience.
No,
In deep
there are
meditation, you will not know your body, existence of your body. Your mind is not, it's a thoughtless state. It's a thoughtless state.
So
it is possible to experience that state if you are practicing in that mode of it, and then you are conscious about it. But your body is not there at all with you.
Yeah, you are beautifully visualizing a certain possibility.
It is not mental visualization. No, it is not a mental visualization.
There are also reports
your existence, you're experiencing a different world.
Okay, that's okay. But you made a statement, there is no body at all.
Memory is not there, thoughts are not there. So thoughtless state, it is that. So you don't know the body at all. Then you come back after some time, is a different thing. But that state of existence, you're experiencing it. That is nothing but leaving the body is permanently living is one level, or for a short time you are in that state is another level. You may call it a death, or you may call it as anything. Whatever you call it is a different. That is a state. How do we explain that? It may not be. For somebody, it is dead only, because your body is not moving. Mind is not working. It is not a thought.
Well said.
So it is also a state of death or not. You may define the English as death, body is not dead. All these things is an explanation. But experience side, it is just that.
Well said. Thank you. Well said. Yeah, thank you for sharing. So Shakti Kumar from Varanasi asks a question. In the expression Chetasa na anyagamina, na anyagamina means we should not go anywhere, from where it ought not to move anywhere or elsewhere. Yeah, so it should be in A and it should not go to B, C, D, etc. So his question is, what is this A where it ought to be? The mind has to be in A, should not go to B, C, D, E, X, Y, P, Q, etc. So what is this A? I would say from a Jnana Marga point of view, the sustained appreciation of the undivided consciousness. That is A. Stay in undivided consciousness. If you ask what is divided, the other and me, another person and me. You know, the picturing of another person and picturing of myself, the mind creates these two pictures. That is divided consciousness. Scriptural studies, insights of mystics help us to realize that that division is created by thought. So we let go of that division, then we are in state A. So Krishna says, stay in that state A, where there is no thought-created division, and don't go to numerous possibilities of divisions. Divisions are countless. The undivided state is one without a second. Ullas Page, excellent insights with regard to death. Yes. Thank you, Ullas ji. So nice you joined today. Okay. Some last comment for the day or a question? Not quite. All right. I guess next Sunday, Professor Pankaj Basotia will present this webinar on an Upanishadic way of looking at dying. I welcome and invite all of you to join that. His views may not be so traditional like how I go about things, but it will be interesting to see the academic view. He did his PhD on Kathopanishad. He is a professor of philosophy in Himachal Pradesh, Shimla. He has been a good friend of mine. We have spent many hours discussing such things. So that will be next week. And this was a prelude to that webinar. Namaste, everyone. Good night to those in the East. Good day to everybody in the West. Hari Om.